What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. The NBA free agency moratorium opens up today on the day of me filming this video, which is very, very exciting, and it means that over the course of the next couple of days or so, we should be starting to hear about some developments regarding the bigger rumors in free agency. So today we'll be breaking down specifically how I think the Raptors will be approaching this free agency period, including how Toronto might be addressing some of their major holes and issues at both the point guard and center positions. So anyways, let's get right into the video, but before we do get into some of the potential targets, let's break down what their weaknesses actually are. Sort of talked about this just a second ago, but of course the first one is that point guard position. Now we'll sort of break down the Lowry situation throughout this video, but I think that in some way, whether it's a sign and trade or he straight up just walks in free agency, that we will not see Lowry in a Raptors uniform next year. That being said, the Raptors have some potential fixes internally, Fred VanVleet being one of those guys, but given his play style, I like him a lot more at the 2. I'm also one of the people that are very high on Malachi Flynn, but I think you got to give him another year to develop before, he's at that stage in his career where he can be that number 1 point guard option. Obviously, the second thing that the Raptors need to address is that center position, and I think that Raptors fans will be more than happy to move on from that Baines project, which calling a failed experiment would definitely be an understatement. Now, they did slightly turn it around. You got some decent big men. Chris Boucher, Kem Birch did very solid jobs last year. Gillespie as well definitely helped out the bigs in general at the 4 and the 5, but I think that it goes without saying that the Raptors are better with these guys off the bench. And I think that in this free agency period, you're looking for a real upgrade, or at least definitely some depth at that center position. Last thing that I would say is some overall shooting. Raptors were 26th in the NBA last year in their shooting percentage and 20th in effective field goal percentage. Now, after trading Norman Powell, I would love a very solid wing player. We'll break a couple of those down in this video as well. I would like to see a much more efficient offense this year from the Raptors. Quickly, also before we do get into the targets in terms of the cap space, it's really tough to judge because you don't know what's going to happen with Lowry, and according to some NBA executives, the contract to Gary Trent Jr. might push close to $20 million, so it could be anywhere between like 10 and 30 million, but we're going to do our best to stay within that cap space. So let's start with point guard targets, and there's a really interesting one that I want to start with, which is Goran Dragic. Now, he's not a free agent, but the reason that I am talking about him in this video is because Lowry is a free agent, and sort of this sign and trade in the free agency definitely work hand in hand. So Goran Dragic had his option picked up yesterday, a massive, massive contract. But after that, also, the rumors between the Raptors and the Miami Heat definitely picked up. And I wouldn't necessarily mind it. Goran Dragic, yes, he's old. He's 35 years old, I think. But last year averaged 13.4 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, and 4.4 assists. And what I really like about Goran Dragic is that he brings a lot of the same qualities that Lowry does. And it would allow him to be a very good transition point guard between two different eras if you only have Dragic for a year. He's a crafty player, definitely a very good leader, which could definitely help for this younger team that the Raptors do have. And even though he doesn't give you the same defense and the same defensive pluses that Lowry does, I think the big help here would be giving a bridge and gap year that would allow Malachi Flynn to develop for another year and put VanVleet at the 2, which is what I was mentioning before. The big thing that you also got to remember here is that this package wouldn't be a one-for-one deal. And as we'll talk about later in the video as well, a guy like Duncan Robinson, who could definitely help the Raptors off the wing, and in terms of his shooting ability, would definitely help the Raptors roster move in the right direction, which is why as long as you're willing to deal with that contract and the age and just think of it as just being a one gap year, I think that this sign and trade could definitely be a possibility. Lonzo Ball is another interesting one. Now, unfortunately, this morning we heard that Chicago is more than the leaders right now for Lonzo Ball, and they're expected to make a huge offer around $80 million total. But as suitors go for the Raptors, Lonzo Ball would definitely be a great fit. He's a guy with very good size, is a great defender, knows how to run an offense. And again, is a great transition guy for Lowry. His jumper is still a little bit inconsistent, but statistically speaking, he's been improving over the course of the past couple of years. And I think he would be great working with Siakam, really similar to some traits that I would have liked in a guy like Jalen Suggs. So Lonzo Ball would be super interesting here for the Raptors. Two other guards that I want to sort of address, Dinwiddie and Dennis Schroder. Now, I don't think they're going to go out and sign either of these guys, but I think they're worth taking a look at. Dinwiddie's an interesting one. He's a risky guy coming off that partial ACL tear, but you'd assume he's now a buy low guy, but also a high reward kind of guy because he averaged 20.6 points per game, 6.5 assists, 3.5 boards only a year ago in that shortened NBA bubble season back in 1920. He's not a great shooter, but he is a great ball handler, and he's another great transition player if you want to sort of go away from Kyle Lowry. Really similar to Dennis Schroder, a guy who led and really did a great job leading a Lakers offense last year that had a super weird dynamic. And Schroeder's a guy who in the past has shown he's got a lot of versatility, even if he does come off the bench. But yeah, two guys that I would still keep an eye on for sure. In terms of big men, Jarrett Allen is the guy that always jumps out at you and would really be the home run of free agency this year for the Raptors. But it seemed unlikely before, seems even more unlikely in my opinion now. Of course, last year, Allen, 12.8 points per game, 10 rebounds, 1.4 blocks, and obviously very good numbers. And what you would love about Allen is his ability to play two ways, and even though he's not a stretch player, he's very good at inside. Now, there's two issues with Jarrett Allen, though. The main issue, first of all, is he's a restricted free agent. It's a lot harder to sign restricted free agents because, of course, the other team has an opportunity to match the contracts. Now, from what I've been hearing, the Cavs would be willing to pay right around that $100 million range. And, you know, in terms of the Raptors' money situation, you can see why that would definitely be an issue. I'm also going to say up front, first of all, before I get into this next point, that I do like the Scottie Barnes pick. But not drafting Jalen Suggs does now mean, again, as we were talking about before, that the Raptors got to go a little bit harder in for a point guard. So I think that you got to put a lot of money into there, whether it's into Lowry or it's for one of the other guards that I was just talking about. So it does take money away from a center that you might have been able before to put into a guy like Jarrett Allen. The most likely guy for me is Rashawn Holmes from Sacramento, a guy that I've spoken about probably the most coming into this free agency period, a guy who's got great athleticism, is a great inside player offensively and defensively, great finisher at the rim, can definitely block some shots. Now, Holmes might not have the age factor. I think he's like 3 years older than Jarrett Allen, but he does come with a lot of similarities to Jarrett Allen, unfortunately including a lot of the same weaknesses, including his perimeter shooting. But he's definitely a cheaper option and was actually statistically better than Jarrett Allen last year. Holmes is a guy who you could probably snag for $10 to $15 million in free agency, hopefully right within the Raptors' range and budget that they're looking to spend to sort of address this five, and I think would be the best and cheapest option to address the Raptors' starting issue. Another guy would be Nerlens Noel. Now, this is a guy that I like a lot, but not as a starting option, and I see him more as a backup center option. Really on any team that should be pushing for the playoffs, but at least in the higher part of the Eastern Conference. Now, don't get me wrong, Nerlens Noel is a fantastic defender, and, if you're looking for an interior paint protector, Nerlens Noel, definitely that guy, but he's got a limited offensive game. And the thing with the Raptors going into free agency, especially addressing the center issue, is you already got guys like Khem Birch and Chris Boucher, who you're more than happy to be at your 4 and 5 coming off the bench. So I want the Raptors to really go in and put the money on only a guy who's going to be that starting number 5 guy. And I don't know if Nerlens Noel is that guy, but if there's some way you can sign him for a really, really cheap, maybe $5 million contract, let's say, and you want to chuck him off the bench, he's a guy that I would definitely be happy to have here. Doug McDermott is an interesting one. I've heard these rumors swirl a little bit more lately. And he's an interesting one because he's a 6'7" wing and a very good three-point shooter. Not a typical guy that you would see on the Raptors roster, but shot over 40% from three each year since 2017, with the one exception being last year where he shot just under 39%. I think it was like 38.8%. But the real interesting guy in terms of a shooter or a wing, as I was mentioning before, is Duncan Robinson and a potential sign and trade, with Dragic. You also get Duncan Robinson back for a guy like Kyle Lowry. Now, Duncan Robinson, restricted free agent, but again, it would work if the Heat re-signed him and then you put him in that sign and trade package. Robinson provides height and size at the 2 and 3. He's also 6'7". Last year put up 13.1 points per game on 41% from 3. And I'd go as far as saying he is probably one of, if not the most lethal shooters, or at least in the top 5 lethal shooters in the entire league. So this would definitely be a guy who could slot right into the Raptors rotation, give you some, another look from that wing position. And a three-point shooter that I think the Raptors haven't had in a while and desperately need. But anyways, guys, if you did make it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts, comments, and predictions on anything that I talked about today, and again, your predictions on what you guys expect from the Raptors in this free agency period. If you guys did enjoy today's video, make sure to smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more Raptors content just like this, and you definitely won't want to miss it because this is going to be a very busy and interesting offseason for Toronto. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.